Welcome to the Brandywell and Creggan areas of Derry. The Brandywell and Creggan are claimed by many from there and not from there to be the best areas in the city to live in. But what many people don't know is that Creggan and the Brandywell neighbourhoods are the most haunted areas of the city. The Guinness Book of Records lists the areas as having the most ghost stories and old wives' tales than any other area in the world. Is this true? I'll let you decide.
The story of the death knock has been told many times, but the story has origins from the streets of Creggan. Years ago, on Halloween night, there were two girls who were on the phone to each other, as they normally did each night. One of the friends has been telling a story which they had heard about the death knock, which was a sign that something bad was going to happen. Her friend didn't believe the story and was making funny faces at her phone, when suddenly she heard 3 loud bangs that shook her house. Her friend thought she was messing about at first and dismissed the bang, but suddenly she too heard 3 bangs in her home too. Both the girls jumped in alarm, and at this stage both girls were paralysed with fear. They feared which one of them would be next.
There was reputedly the ghost of a young girl in the window of a house in Beechwood Avenue. The figure of this little girl was seen several times sitting in the garden. Those in the house found it impossible at times to pass this part. One report says that it was as if there was a wall of ice preventing anyone going up. One of the rooms was extremely cold despite various attempts to heat it up. No recent reports have come to light about this ghostly figure.
This is a story that has been told many times before about the headless horseman that hunts Southway, one of the main roads into Creggan. There was a young girl walking up Southway from her friend's house in the Brandywell. The girl started to hear loud footsteps behind her and turned, but nothing was there. She turned and started walking a bit quicker. Again she heard the footsteps, but this time it was accompanied by what sounded like horses. Suddenly, a large coach and horses flew past her down the road, then disappeared.
Another story, situated in the Brandywell area, is that of the appearance of some sort of spirit in a house in Donegal Place. A young girl who was a student was staying in the house overnight. She was having a chat with her friend in the garden who lived there, when the door to the front of the house flung open and they saw the figure of a woman dressed in an old-fashioned long grey dress standing at the door. Then she disappeared. They thought they were seeing things and went to the hall door to check if someone was playing a trick on them. The door burst open again. The shape of the woman reappeared. Both girls took off on their heels and ran as fast as they could down the street.
At the bottom of Creggan sits the Rosemount factory, which dominates the skyline. It was once a proud shirt factory that provided work for the women of the city. Because of the lack of work in the town for men, many followers went to England for employment. Wives stayed at home or worked in the shirt factories, hoping that the extra money might help them get out of the poverty trap. One night, as a girl was sitting listening to an old story from her grandmother of how in the 1940s, when her and her husband were married, they had to move in with her parents. They lived in a small terraced house which was overcrowded, with 1 family to each room and 3 or 4 families to a house. In one house there were 4 generations living. Her grandmother had always looked after her children, rocking them to sleep in her rocking chair and singing a lullaby. When she died, she was mourned deeply and terribly missed by her daughter and granddaughter, who both worked in the Rosemount factory. One night, as the young girl was passing the old shirt factory, she could hear sewing machines and the distinctive noise of a rocking chair. She tried to convince herself that she was hearing something which wasn't there, but the more she tried to ignore it, the more persistent the sound of the rocking became. Then she heard her grandmother's voice crooning a lullaby, just as she had done in life. It was the shirt factory song. She ran home as fast as she could to tell her family of the story, and when passing the hall where the rocking chair now sits, she could see the rocking chair moving ever so slightly.
Our final story tells us of the Banshee of the Brandywell. There was once a young man named John who lived in the Brandywell. When John's grandfather was very ill, he was sent to his grandparents' house in Deanery Street to keep them company. John was to look out for them and fetch his father if anything happened. One night, John heard a terrible commotion from the backyard, which sounded like 1,000 dogs and cats wailing and screeching outside the back door. John was frightened, but grabbed his grandfather's walking stick and went to see what was going on. The wailing noise was so loud, but suddenly there was silence. John switched on his torch, but there was nothing to be seen. Then the wailing started again, and this time it seemed to be coming from the front of the house. The back door had slammed shut behind him, so he went through the back lane. Again, despite the noise being so loud, John couldn't see anything there. All of a sudden, his grandmother came running out of the house crying. John's father came running across the street. John's grandmother grabbed him and whispered, "You heard the Banshee, didn't you?" John immediately began crying, apologizing to his father. His father gave him a hug and told him that something else had warned him, that something was the Banshee. True to the superstition, it had followed their family, whose name began with MC.